4 years ago, I sat with ayahuasca for the first time, and it is coming up on 2 years since I actually worked and lived at an ayahuasca retreat in the Sacred Valley of Peru. So I knew that this video was coming at some point, but it felt really important to me that I didn't rush this because I knew that I was still integrating, and I know that I am still integrating now. Let's talk for a quick second about how this video is going to hopefully flow if I can stick to some kind of structure. I am going to share with you sort of the timeline of my experience with ayahuasca from the first time that I sat with grandmother until I worked at an ayahuasca retreat, and my time in the past few years where I actually have not been working with plant medicine, and what I have really come to understand and integrate and download in life afterwards, which really is where so many of the lessons and understandings actually show up. And then finally, I will end this video by answering a couple questions that I get all the time on this channel. Was it worth it? And is ayahuasca for everyone? So stick around to the end if you're curious to hear the answers to those questions. Before we get into my personal experience with ayahuasca, let's honor and give a little bit of an explanation of what this beautiful medicine actually is. Ayahuasca is an absolutely incredible, beautiful, powerful plant medicine, sacred plant medicine, an entheogen that is indigenous to the countries around the Amazon basin. So Peru, Ecuador, Colombia, and Brazil. And there is so much to be said for ayahuasca, but oftentimes she is referred to as a feminine spirit, as grandmother. Ayahuasca is also known as the vine of death, and it has been used by indigenous healers and shamans for generations, for thousands of years, for expansion, healing, deeper understandings, connection, realizations, remembrance of who we are and why we are here and how connected we all are to this planet, to each other, to the universe. Indigenous shamans believe that most diseases, most illnesses are actually manifestations of a blockage that has occurred in the energy body of a person's being. And so they believe that in order to heal, we really need to get to the energetic root imbalance of what is causing our issue. And so this is where ayahuasca comes in. Ayahuasca acts as a guide to lead us into our own inner landscapes, to dive into our subconscious terrain, to really uncover what it is that is holding us back, uncover what it is that maybe it trauma, maybe past experiences, maybe limiting beliefs that we are holding on to so tightly. And these beliefs, these outdated systems, these are the things that are keeping us from living and stepping into our fullest potential and the power that we have that is available to us as incredible divine beings. I have talked a lot and not gotten into the juice of this video, so let's go ahead and get into it. Let's talk about the calling, shall we? Because many people, when we refer to ayahuasca, we talk about feeling called to work with ayahuasca. And that happened to me. I was living in Australia back in 2017. And this is kind of when the seed was planted in my consciousness of even hearing about ayahuasca for the first time. And I had friends who were working with ayahuasca. It was being talked about, like it was just in my field of awareness. And I didn't know that much about it, but I knew that it was something that I wanted to experience when the time was right. And so I didn't feel rushed. I didn't feel like it needed to happen right away. And this is quite common. It is very normal for someone to feel called to ayahuasca sometimes years before they even sit with this medicine for the first time. So yes, I felt called to work with ayahuasca and came back from Australia and got back to the United States right when we had the pandemic. So I was in lockdown, just like all of you. And as soon as lockdown lifted, I think it was November of 2020, I was out of here. I immediately flew to Costa Rica for my first ayahuasca experience. I I didn't know what to expect. I kind of intentionally went into it without having done too much research because I wanted to be able to have my own experience without too many expectations. It was only a 2-night ayahuasca ceremony. We did work with some other medicines. We worked with Wachuma or San Pedro, which is the most beautiful medicine as well. But 2 nights of ayahuasca. A lot can happen in 2 nights. Let me tell you, a lot can happen in 1 night. My second night of ayahuasca at this retreat was truly one of the most beautiful, profound, deeply connective, incredible experiences of my life. I mean, it was just divinity, connection, unconditional love, beauty, truly experiencing what it feels like to be connected with all that is, all at the same time. Deeply safe, deeply held, worthy, loved. I mean, it was so beautiful. It was so beautiful. I could have stayed there forever. However, there's so much more to experience. And I came out of that journey just in awe of ayahuasca. I loved her. It felt like she was like my mom and my best friend and just this incredible, beautiful spirit. All of these stories that I had heard about, challenging and scary and dark experiences with ayahuasca, I was like, what are those people talking about? This was beautiful. She's so great. This was amazing. I guess I just have a really great time with ayahuasca. Yeah. So it was beautiful. It really was. It was so profound. It was just so, so, so loving and deeply connecting. It was like heaven. It was like heaven on earth. It's one of those things that you just can't put into words. So that was me leaving that experience. And I was ready to go and have another ayahuasca experience. Like if I could have done it sooner, I would have. But life, I had other things to do. I lived my life for the next year and I didn't integrate anything. Integration, at least I should say intentional integration, conscious integration, was really not something that I focused on at all. For multiple reasons. I think I wasn't really super well educated on the concept of integration in general. And I also, to be honest, I think because I had such a light, beautiful, fun, just like there wasn't any challenging aspect to that experience. And so I didn't really feel that I had anything to integrate. It just felt like, I just get to go on and live life and see the beauty in everything. 1 year later, I am attending a retreat in Mexico. I will preface my experience by saying that the owner was actually at this retreat center. And before the second night of ceremony, he actually asked me if I would be interested in coming to work at this ayahuasca retreat center in Peru. And so up until this point, I've had nothing but the most beautiful experiences. So this is like a dream come true. The idea to go and work and serve at an ayahuasca retreat. I was pumped. I was very excited. And so that night we went into our second ceremony of this specific retreat. I am sitting in my bed, my mattress, my ayahuasca sanctuary. And I am so excited because I have not sat with grandmother ayahuasca for a year. And she is so nice and she loves me so much. And I am just so pumped for this experience because I'm ready. I'm ready to experience the love and the light and the joy and being in heaven. Yeah. So things start out pretty normally, nothing too extreme. And all of a sudden, everything changed. The energy started to shift. The room started to get cold. And within an instant, I was in my own hell. I was in the depths of hell. And it was the scariest, most disconnected, lonely, like just void of love space that I've ever been in my entire life. Any like anything that you could think of when you think of the opposite of love and joy and peace and comfort and safety, that is what I was experiencing. I truly believed that I was trapped in the medicine. So my mind had latched onto this story that something had gone wrong. I was stuck in the medicine. I was never going to get out. And my life up until that point, none of it had ever mattered. And it would never matter again. And I would never see my family again. I would never see anyone that I loved. I would never breathe again. I would never experience the beauty of life again. I was just trapped in this void space of fear and loneliness and despair and disconnection. I was colder than I have ever been in my entire life. Like, I cannot even explain this feeling of cold to you because it goes so far beyond my comprehension of what kind of cold we could even possibly feel. And I couldn't control anything. I couldn't control my own body. I couldn't open my mouth to speak. So one thing in ayahuasca ceremonies that they always say is like, if you need help, call out your name or call out for help. I couldn't talk. I couldn't even open my mouth. So I was alone, completely and totally alone. I couldn't have asked for help if I wanted to. Almost against my own will, my body would sit up and I would reach for my blanket and I would go to pull my blanket back down on top of me because I was so cold. And it was like ayahuasca would let me reach for the blanket, but right before I could grab it, she would throw me back down onto the bed again. Over and over again, this would happen. I would reach for the blanket and I would be thrown back down again. And it was like, no, you will never experience comfort. You will never experience warmth. Like, you are going to suffer for all of eternity. And all around me was just the sounds of purging and moaning. And to me, because of where I was at in this experience, it truly just sounded like hell. It felt like hell. It was like, this is what it would be like to go to hell. This is it. I'm here. All of the things that I had ever expressed to myself in a space of unworthiness and lacking love, like, those were the messages that I was hearing over and over and over again. And I wanted it to end. I couldn't handle it. I mean, that's what I felt in that moment. It was like, I can't do this. I cannot have this be my eternity. There was such a deep, deep fear. Again, it's like I can't even put words to that level of fear and distress and shock that this was my new reality. And so to be totally raw and vulnerable, because that is what we are doing in this video, if in that moment someone had said to me, you can die and escape this, I would have taken it in a heartbeat. Like, anything other than that, I would have just welcomed without a question. I would have rather died than experience what I was experiencing, because it was just the deepest, like I said, the deepest despair and disconnection and fear. And I truly, truly believed that that was all I was ever going to experience forever. And when you're in an ayahuasca experience, there's really no concept of time. So even though this may have been like a 6-hour experience, it felt like my forever. It felt like my eternity. So yeah, I would have escaped. I would have escaped if I could had. And I know that that may be triggering for some people to hear, but that's my truth, and I am being honest about it. And there's also like a lesson to come with that. So I'll share that in a bit. So I'm in the pits of hell, in my darkest experience, and I think I'm trapped forever. And all of the sudden, again, something shifts. And it's like the briefest flash, the briefest moment of recognition that something had changed. But my God, I cannot even put to words the relief I felt in that single moment, because immediately I was aware that that had not been real and that I was coming out of it. And like, I could breathe. I knew that I was alive. I start to calm down. I start to feel my body again. I'm starting to get warmer. and I start to notice my breath. It feels like I am breathing for the first time. Because truly, when I was in that hell, it felt like I couldn't breathe. It felt like there was no air. And so suddenly my breath is flowing through my body, and I have never been more deeply, deeply grateful for something as simple as the breath in my entire life. I had never felt so much gratitude in one single moment for being alive, for the fact that I was safe. It was like these simple things that we don't normally think about were saving me in that moment. And I remember lying there and thinking to myself, I am safe, I'm warm, I can breathe, I'm alive. That wasn't real, it's okay, I'm okay. That realization was unlike anything that I have ever experienced in my life. Just the deepest, profound gratitude for being alive in that moment, for breathing in that moment. I mean, I genuinely whispered that to myself, laying there on this mattress over and over again for I don't know how long. I'm free. I am safe. I'm alive. I'm free. I'm safe. I'm alive. Those words were my mantras in that moment that were really anchoring me into just regrounding myself after that experience. It was a very interesting aftermath, shall we say, to this ayahuasca journey, because although in that moment when I was kind of coming out of it, there was this immediate feeling of safety and relief, within a couple hours, I would say I kind of reconnected to the fear. I felt very disconnected. I felt deeply, deeply traumatized and very confused as to what I had just experienced, because it was the complete opposite of my first ayahuasca experience, again, which was heaven. It was bliss. It was unconditional love. And this was the pendulum swinging to the other side. It was disconnection, hell, just complete despair. I hadn't expected it, which again, it's like one of the biggest lessons I've learned from ayahuasca, of course, is not to have expectations, but I was a little baby and I had expectations. And so I came out of this and I felt so traumatized. I felt really afraid. I felt really disconnected. I felt like a shadow of myself, if I'm being honest. I sort of felt like a zombie. All of my energy was drained. And I am normally a pretty energetic person, but I was like zapped, drained of my life force, drained of my energy. It had just been such a taxing, exhausting experience in all ways, like energetically, emotionally, physically. All of my energy had just left me and I felt like a shell of myself. And I was really, really scared in that moment, in those hours after this experience, and even in the days after this experience, that I was never going to be myself again, that I was not going to return to this like happy, joyful version of who I had known myself to be, who I had identified myself with being up until that point. And that was really scary. It also felt like an existential crisis. I was questioning the truth of the universe. Like I was questioning, is the universe good? Is God good? Is any of this real? And what is the nature of reality? Is it good? Is it bad? It was like all of these questions going through my mind. I was having a panic attack at an existential scale of what it meant. You know, this kind of like ultimate uncertainty of what all of this is. And I was so scared. And I just had so much fear that had built up from this experience and that really stuck with me moving forward. And we'll get into that. We'll talk about that more. I was also mad. I was angry. I was mad at ayahuasca. You know, I felt betrayed, like she had tricked me, taking me from this beautiful light experience and then throwing me into the depths of hell. I also felt a lot of shame. I felt a really deep-rooted shame around my experience. And especially the next day, a lot of times after an ayahuasca journey, you'll have like a group share in the morning. And I felt really ashamed of sharing the fact that I had had this dark journey. I think I was really attached to the idea that so much of my energy and my being was like this light, vibrant, positive person. And so to have such a dark experience, it brought up a lot of shame and judgment around what I didn't realize existed within me, which was this really deep-seated judgment of tapping into darker experiences and the negative emotions that exist within me. So yeah, there was a lot of shame. So I had a lot of feelings. I had a lot of feelings after this, and I thought that I had made a really big mistake. I definitely thought and believed for quite a while afterwards that I might have made a mistake, and that maybe I had affected my own mental health in a way that was irreversible. Like, what if I have broken a part of myself that will never heal? This was a little bit of a reoccurring loop that I had for quite a long time throughout the integration process, and this fear that stuck with me for quite a long time that had not existed before. That's the other thing, is I was experiencing a level of fear that I had never consciously experienced. Not that it wasn't in my experience, but I had never consciously allowed it to be felt, and it was being felt. So, I get out of this ayahuasca experience, and I remember that I have agreed to go and work at an ayahuasca retreat in Peru. And so the conflicting emotions, my God, of having this deeply traumatizing experience, kind of having like a never wanting to work with ayahuasca ever again kind of mindset, feeling betrayed by ayahuasca. But I've just agreed to go and work at this retreat center. And so I'm going back and forth with myself, like, am I going to do this? Am I not going to do this? Do I say no? Do I change my mind? I kind of knew, I knew pretty much immediately that I had to say yes. I knew that if I allowed the fear to define my choice, that the fear would take over, that the fear would be in control. And in order for me to move through the fear and integrate the fear, I had to continue to work with ayahuasca. I mean, it was just this deep kind of understanding of like, my path is not complete with this medicine, and actually the fear itself is going to be the catalyst for something greater. Even though I'm not really able to see that right now, I kind of understood that at a subconscious level. So I knew I had to move through the fear, as much as I didn't want to. So I did make the choice to go and work at this ayahuasca retreat in the Sacred Valley. And we'll get to that in a second. But let's really quickly just talk about my kind of immediate realizations on a positive note that came to me within the first, let's say, like couple days, couple weeks after this experience. So the first one was to release expectations. With ayahuasca, with life in general, and any experience, it is our own expectations that causes us to suffer. Because when we decide that something has to be a certain way, that it has to look a certain way in order for us to feel satisfied or be happy or feel fulfilled, if it ever goes in any other way, then we have given our control over to that situation to determine our own happiness and fulfillment. Whereas when we can release expectations and let go of how things have to be, then we can really tap into our own inner peace no matter what is happening around us. It's not always easy, but it does make things a lot simpler. And so releasing those expectations, I can tell you as well from working at the ayahuasca retreat, oftentimes the people who were the most angry or frustrated or upset about their experiences were the ones who had come in with the most expectations beforehand. If we can let go of those expectations, it makes life a lot easier in general. The second realization that I had was gratitude. Nothing will reinforce your gratitude for life more than feeling like you are dying. More than believing that you have come close to death or that you have died or that you have lost everything. That is what I believed to be my experience that night. Things that I had really taken for granted oftentimes in my life up until that point, my family, feeling safe, feeling warm, feeling comfortable and protected, going without them and believing that I would never experience them ever again made me realize how incredibly valuable they actually are. The breath, feeling alive, being able to feel my body, feeling safe in my body, all of these things, being able to speak and open my mouth and ask for help, ask for assistance when I need it. So many of these things we take for granted. Truly, it is the simple things actually that bring the most peace and contentment and joy in life. So ironically, the worst night of my life actually renewed my appreciation for life itself. The next realization that I had pretty soon after was that hell is a creation of our own minds. You may or may not agree with me on that, and that is absolutely okay, but I believe without a shadow of a doubt that hell is not a physical place. Hell is a space that we create in our thoughts. It is more of like an energetic space that is created when we choose to suffer, when we allow ourselves to get stuck in these belief systems and these negative loops that create our own suffering. That is hell. And oftentimes when we choose this sort of victim mentality and we latch on to these beliefs that we continue to loop in our minds of the fact that we are unworthy or we're disconnected or unloved, that is hell. That is what creates our suffering. That ceremony also taught me a lot about strength and resilience, because one of the things that I thought as soon as I sort of started to come out of what I was experiencing and shifting into realizing that I was alive, realizing that I was safe, was this thought of, if I can experience that, if I can make it through that, I can make it through anything. Nothing could ever be as terrifying and scary and empty as that experience. And so if I survived that, I can survive anything. Ever since that night, when I have moments of stress, of pain, of fear, of suffering, whatever it may be, I will actually reconnect to that night. I will remind myself of that night and really remind myself that I survived that, I can survive this. If I made it through that, I can make it through anything. The final kind of immediate realization was related to empathy. Throughout my life, the majority of the closest people to me, my best friends, just some of the people that I've been closest to, have been people who have experienced a lot of really deep traumas, like quite significant traumas and situations of suffering in their life, whether it was family members committing suicide, really deep addictions, depression, or anxiety. That was something that really surrounded me in a lot of my close personal relationships. And as much as I was able to sympathize with these things, I was not ever fully able to empathize, to be in a full state of empathy for those experiences, because I myself had not experienced them. I had never experienced depression in that way. I had my own stuff. I had other forms of like mental health related things that I had dealt with, but never like a deep depression or anything like that. And I remember having a conversation with one of my best friends after this ayahuasca journey and explaining this kind of hell experience to her, like the loneliness, the fear, the belief that I would never escape it, that this was going to be my reality for the rest of my life. And after I finished explaining it to her, she looked at me and she said, "Danielle, that is exactly what it feels like when I am in the depths of my depression." And it finally clicked for me. I understood. I knew what it felt like. What's so interesting about all of this is that since this ayahuasca experience, I've actually experienced deeper levels of pain and fear than I ever had before, and even depression in a way that I never had before in these kind of moments as I navigated through my integration. But I'm really actually quite grateful for that, because it allowed me to connect, to understand what people were going through in a way that I would not have before. And especially moving into working at this ayahuasca retreat, if I had gone to this ayahuasca retreat and just been this facilitator who had only experienced these beautiful love and light, divine journeys with ayahuasca. But then I'm sitting here trying to connect and resonate with people who are going through their own personal hell. Like, how am I going to connect with them? How am I going to understand? So as challenging as it was, and as challenging as the integration process has been and continued to be for a long time, I do not regret it for a moment, because it opened up this deeper kind of reservoir of understanding within me of what that feels like. So let's kind of shift into the next part of this video. Fast forward to 2022, January of 2022. And I'm in Peru. I'm in the Sacred Valley, and I'm starting to work at this plant medicine retreat center. I worked there for a year. And over the course of that year, I witnessed so many transformations, so many healings, so many experiences. We had a new group every single week. So every single week for a year, a new group of people came through. And so I didn't see it all. I mean, I definitely didn't see it all, because there's an infinite amount of things that could happen, but it certainly felt like I saw and witnessed and experienced a lot. But it was incredible in all ways. It was deeply challenging. It was deeply rewarding. It was beautiful. It was scary. It was so rewarding, and it was so connecting, which really was one of the best parts of this experience. The humans that I met along the way from working at this ayahuasca retreat, you just see this incredible side of humanity and people healing themselves and doing the inner work, and it's just inspiring. So yeah, the connection aspect of being at that center was beyond incredible. But I want to touch on my first ayahuasca experience at this retreat center. So this is the first Aya experience that I've had working as a facilitator. And this is also the first ayahuasca experience that I've had since my really traumatic experience and journey. So I'm scared shitless, if we're being honest. Like, I am so deeply afraid. I didn't really want to do it. I was so terrified that I would be sent back into that hell. And I mean, that's the last place that I wanted to go. So in this ceremony, I went up, I had my first cup, and it was very chill. It was like very mild. I was a little bit connected to the medicine, but nothing crazy was happening. And I was like, I'm kind of okay with this. This is safe. This feels not scary to me. But when they called for the second cup, I knew I had to. But my plan was just to take a little bit. So I went up and I sat in front of the shaman, and I said, just a little bit, please. I'm going to keep this one kind of light and not scary, and I'm just going to do baby steps into it, right? And the shaman looks at me and just like pours a full cup of ayahuasca and hands it to me. I was like, okay, that's what's happening. So I drink my second full cup of ayahuasca. I go back, I sit at my mat, and it went all in. Within a few minutes, probably, I started to recognize, I started to become aware that I was going back into that place. I was going back into that hell of my own creation, that hell of my own mind. And so, of course, initially, fear was coming up. So much fear was rising within me. Oh, hi, Sassy. Come here. Come say hi. Hey, Sassy. It's okay. Oh, that's my ring. Come here. Hi, Sassy. Oh, no, that's my ring. It's not food. Say hi. Okay, sorry. Say hi. Don't hold the chicken. Sassafras is a very verbal chicken. So if you are hearing Sassy make lots of noises, then go with it. Where were we? I start to dive back into this kind of hell experience, but something about it this time was different. Suddenly I was witnessing. I was observing it, almost like from an outsider's perspective, rather than creating stories around what was happening to me and around me, I was the witness. I was the observer. And from this witnessing perspective, there was no fear. I was able to really observe what was happening without judgment of the experience. And so I was able to sit with the feelings and the emotions and all of these things that were rising up within me. I was able to just sit with them, allow them to be what they were without judging them, without fearing them. And so all of the suffering that had been created and manifested in my last experience because of the stories, because of the judgments, I was free from that. So now in my daily experience, moving forward from that journey, I'm able to really reconnect with that understanding that in being the witness, it allows us to take a step back from the stories that create the suffering. This hell that is created in our own minds, it is created because we are not being the witness. And so anytime that something happens to me nowadays where I start to kind of notice that fear is arising, that I'm stressed, that I'm creating these narratives, I remind myself to take a step back and just observe and allow myself to just be present with what is from the perspective of a witness. And it really like lifts me out of the space of the pain and the suffering and the fear. Whew. So like I said, there were so many other journeys, obviously, that I had working at this retreat center for the period of a year. But one last thing that I will say before we get into the kind of final integration and reflections after working at this retreat center is that in my own experience, many of my journeys kind of forced me to look at and accept a level of darkness that I had never wanted to look at before, to really, really face and embrace and integrate my own fears. And one thing that I noticed over the series of quite a few ayahuasca journeys was that I would have these almost like entities approaching me and coming into my space. And they felt not evil, but scary. They felt disconcerting in a way. They felt really deeply uncomfortable. I didn't want them in my space. I wanted them to go away. I was afraid of them. But no matter what I did, they wouldn't go away. At first, I was like trying to ask them to go away. I tried to force them to go away. I tried to build this bubble around myself to protect myself, all these different things. And after the course of many, many ayahuasca ceremonies of this happening, I finally got to the point where I was over it. I couldn't deal with it anymore. I was exhausted. And I just fully surrendered into this space of allowance of like, you know what? I am not going to fight this anymore. I'm not going to try to send you away. I am just going to send you love. And I don't fully understand you. Maybe I never will. But I accept you in this moment. I send you love in this moment. And I am just really going to step into this space of allowance for what is here now. The moment that I did that, ayahuasca was like, girl, why did it have to take so long? Hello? That is what I've been waiting for. And they were gone. These beings, entities, energies that I was manifesting, the moment that I showed them love and allowed them to be, allowed them to exist in a space of love, they transmuted, they transcended into a space of love themselves, into a space where there really is no fear. And there is nothing but connection. And so that was such a huge lesson for me, was when we are in a state of fear, when we are in a state of, pushing things away and wanting things to not be as they are, if we can actually come back to a space of love, that is all that any of us want in this life. We might not all be aware of it, but we all want to come back to a space of love because that is our nature. That is who we are. That is what we are. That is our essence. And so to be able to reconnect with love and show and express love in that moment is something that I carry with me to this day. Like, how can I come back to love? How can I be in a space of love as much as possible, even when it's hard, even when it's challenging, when I'm mad or when I'm judging or whatever it may be? How can I come back to love? Let's just go ahead and move on to my experience post ayahuasca, the full-on integration phase where I was not working with any plant medicine. And it does look like It is actually about to storm here. I don't know if you've been able to hear the thunder that's happened a couple times, if the microphone has picked that up, but it is very possible that I will have to run inside. And if that is the case, then we will film the rest of this video inside. Clearly, I am in a different location now. It is actually a totally different day. We're just starting fresh and continuing with this video, moving now into integration, into full-on integration, now that it has been 2 years since my last ayahuasca ceremony, pretty much sober, and just allowing myself the time and the space to really reflect and process and integrate. Plant medicine ceremonies are so beautiful, and also I think it's really easy to get caught up in some of these experiences and the highs of always having these transcendental kind of out-of-body experiences, when there's really something very powerful and important about being in our bodies and being grounded and being here in this present moment. You know, there is a reason that we are here in these physical bodies as humans. That is just a little tangent, but I do think that's important, because I've seen so often that people kind of get stuck in consistent plant medicine ceremonies over and over and over. And there's never really allowed an opportunity for a more grounded and present space of integration. So that is not necessarily something that I had even written down, but that's just kind of coming to me now. And I think it's important to be said that we allow these spaces for integration. So let's go ahead and get into it. Let's talk about the main lessons that I have learned, having had the time to reflect, and what ayahuasca has really taught me. Number one, and this is in no particular order, ayahuasca is not a magic pill. It is not a cure-all, and you cannot go into working with ayahuasca or really any plant medicine with an expectation that it's just going to solve all of your problems or issues, or it's just gonna fix everything, because that's not what ayahuasca is here for. And what I've really learned personally is that ayahuasca, like I said before, is more of a guide and more of an opportunity of remembrance. So ayahuasca is going to show you what it is that needs to be seen, what needs to be unearthed, what has been hiding, what has been repressed, the opportunities that you have to continue to evolve and grow. It's going to show you those things. But at the end of the day, you have to be the one to take action, to make changes, to make choices in your life that are going to be in alignment with who it is that you desire to be, who it is that you are capable of being. And so ayahuasca can show you all of these things, but if you come back home and you make the choice to keep living the way you were living before, nothing is going to change. It can actually make things a lot harder, because it has opened up your awareness to what was being hidden, what was being repressed, what you didn't want to look at. And now that you're aware of it, if you don't make those changes, it can actually cause a lot more anxiety, greater feelings of depression or sadness or fear or some of these other things, because there is an awareness of the lack of alignment that is now happening. So yeah, choice, being in integrity, really stepping into your sovereignty as a creative being, and the power that you have to create your own life is so important always, but especially after working with ayahuasca, because you're just so much more aware. The other thing that I will say along the lines of ayahuasca not being a magic pill is that it's really important to be conscious of and to remember that healing is not always pretty. And healing doesn't always look like what we think healing should look like. Oftentimes, our healing can be presented, can be received in a way that feels scary or dark, almost like the opposite of what we would think healing is. It can take months, if not years, to have the perspective where we're able to look back and recognize that healing was taking place when it may have felt like the opposite. You know, there is this saying, you have to feel it to heal it. And that's something that I think about a lot with my really challenging ayahuasca experience, because I really believe that so much of that pain and suffering that was being presented, being felt in that experience, was a lot of repressed trauma that was being released. And so for it to be released and for it to be expressed, I was feeling it. I was feeling all of it. And so much of it was pain and this kind of dark energy that I never wanted to feel before, because it wasn't pretty and it wasn't love and light and all these things, but it had to be felt. It had to be expressed. So it doesn't always look like what we think it's going to look like. And that doesn't mean that it's bad. Healing can look like so many different things. And so it's really important that we release all of the expectations around our healing journey and what that is supposed to look like. And this really rolls into the next lesson that I have learned from ayahuasca, and that is that acceptance is key. Full acceptance of what is in that moment, even the difficult, dark pieces and parts. Ayahuasca often really forces you, maybe I shouldn't say forces you, but gives you a very strong opportunity to face these unwanted feelings that are within you, these repressed energies, and all of the things inside of you that maybe you have deemed to be bad, whether that's from childhood or cultural conditioning or whatever it may be. Ayahuasca gives you the opportunity to really allow those energies to be free and to be accepted without judgment. I definitely had a lot of judgment around this concept of darkness. I think that that is why the experience I had, the traumatic journey, was as traumatic as it was, because I judged it so hard. There was such a lack of acceptance for the fact that I was having a dark journey because of the connotations that I had around what darkness means. And we'll get to this. There's like a whole other conversation around really the reality of darkness and how powerful it is. But when I was able to release the shame around that and release the judgment around darkness being bad or how my journey, quote, should have looked, it just opened things up to be so much easier and to really flow, and for me to understand the beauty that came from an experience that I may have otherwise deemed as unworthy or unacceptable. More so than my positive experiences with ayahuasca, it was the negative experiences that really led me into a deeper understanding of the importance of feeling it all, of allowance and releasing judgment. And this darker journey, it really, with time, allowed me to understand how much I had been shaming myself for experiencing anything that wasn't love and light and positivity, which is, at the end of the day, really a form of spiritual bypassing. And so that was a really critical thing for me to recognize within myself, because yes, of course, there is so much beauty to that, to the love and the light, and that is who we are. But that doesn't mean, like I said, that doesn't mean that the darkness is bad and that it doesn't serve a purpose. I think that one of the biggest things that can arise for a lot of people after the ayahuasca experience is coming back home and feeling like you now should be a certain person, or life should be a certain way, or you should be not experiencing certain feelings or emotions. It's like, I've had this profound, deep spiritual experience and so many awarenesses and realizations. Why am I falling back into these human emotions and these human reactions? So when unwanted feelings or unwanted situations arise, we almost feel like we're falling backwards, like we are not being who we should be or as spiritual or enlightened as we should be now that we've had this experience. And so again, it's coming back to this space of acceptance and awareness, because this is a journey. This is like moving through mountains. There are going to be ups, there are going to be downs. And in these moments, like, this is really the opportunity. This is the chance for us to be more consciously aware of ourselves and to choose in that moment when we notice the judgment arising to be more loving and forgiving and non-judgmental and accepting of ourselves exactly as we are. Along the lines of acceptance, I do think it's super important to mention one extra thing, and that is also being really accepting of others. So yes, there's a huge element of coming back and being accepting of ourselves, our own journey, our own path, the ups and the downs, moving forward through integration, and also accepting of other people. After an ayahuasca experience, it's really easy to feel like we just know it all now and we know how life is supposed to be and we want to go back and tell everyone how they're supposed to be. But every single person is on their own journey and every single person is learning in their own way. And it's kind of like there's different paths for different people, all leading us back to the same place. Just because you have had an experience does not mean that someone else is ready for that lesson or that understanding. And they haven't been where you've been. They haven't experienced what you've experienced. So to expect them to understand is really an unfair expectation. So the best thing that we can do when we come back from such a powerful experience, like a medicine retreat, is to embody what it is that you have learned, what you have experienced, and to really just be this beautiful beam of light and awareness to those around you of what you stand for, of what you have learned. That will inspire them simply by being in your energy, by witnessing the changes that you make. It's almost like planting a seed, right? So you are going to be planting the seed that eventually, when the time is right, if the time is right in this lifetime, will continue to grow for that person, but we don't want to force anything on anyone. Really, that person themselves has to want to make the changes. So be the embodiment of what it is that you want to change, what it is that you want to see in the world, and allow other people to just really feel that energy within you. Allow it to inspire them, and they have the power to make their own choices. Lesson number 3. I kind of feel like this could be its own video in and of itself, so maybe I will actually make another video on this, but my next lesson was really all about, or is really all about, understanding the power of darkness in our experience, and that darkness does not equal bad. In fact, it's imperative that we are able to embrace and integrate darkness within ourselves. Darkness and fear are part of the human experience, and they can be incredibly powerful teachers if we allow them to teach us, if we allow ourselves to learn and grow from these things. And part of what ayahuasca is doing is allowing us to integrate, to confront, and then to integrate our own shadow, these things that have been buried really, really deeply within us, within our subconscious, because we didn't want to look at them, because we judged them or deemed them to be unworthy. And so by really being presented with, by being able to be witness to these shadows and allowing them to arise within us and be expressed and be integrated, we become more whole. We become more in union with ourselves. What I want you to ask yourself is, what if your darkness is actually the key to your liberation, to the highest possibility of freedom in your life? Darkness is actually a portal to such profound inner wisdom. From death and destruction comes new life. And our shadows truly are the key to our rebirth, to our transformation. My challenging ceremony, it really forced me to confront head on my deepest fears, my deepest traumas, everything that I had buried inside, the darkest corners of my mind, which, although hidden, although suppressed, were actually directing my experience in life. Remaining unwilling to look at and embrace these aspects of ourselves, it results in continuous self-rejection. So by facing my darkness, I was given the chance to integrate my shadow, so I could really step out of being unconsciously ruled by it. So I could step into more conscious choices, and also so that I can step into more of my totality, into more of my wholeness. Oftentimes we think of God, of Source as being light. And yes, there is an aspect of God, Source, Creator that is light and, of course, love and beauty, and also darkness and space and void. It is all. It is all of these things. And so none of it needs to be feared. None of it needs to be pushed away or repressed or shunned. And to shun this darker aspect of ourselves, to shun the shadow, is to also shun the light. It is to turn away from the totality of who we are. It is when darkness and light is unified, when it is made whole, that we actually embody the fullness of who we are and the most powerful version of who we are. I want to read this quote to you because I think that it just so perfectly encapsulates this kind of concept of darkness and how it is transmuted through us. It is by Jessica Jordan. I just want to put that out there, but I just think this is such a beautiful, beautiful quote. So here it is. My dear, one day you'll look back and laugh at the things that seemed so dark and painful, realizing that they were only parts and pieces of a divine cosmic plan that sprung forth long before this moment, and one that travels on long after. One day, you'll look back with the wisdom of hindsight, of lessons long integrated, of pain alchemized, of darkness reborn as light. Know now, it's all part of the divine journey, a journey home, a cosmic gift which sometimes tastes bitter before it tastes sweet. Remember now, this is your awakening, the path of fire, the one you chose in the lifetimes gone by, as you birth yourself and the world all over again, anew. Even to think of the creation of life in this physical world, everyone is born from the womb space of their mother. And there is an element of darkness in the womb. It's like when we think of as above, so below. And the beautiful, beautiful womb space of the mother is this microcosm of the macrocosm of the eternal womb space, the universe, what is birthing everything into creation. And so this darkness births life. What could be more powerful than that? So to shun that darkness is to shun this very powerful, feminine, creative aspect of ourselves. There's so much more to it, but our darkness is infinitely powerful, as is our light. And when the two are brought together, we step into the fullness of who we are. So it is not to be feared. And speaking of fear, that is the next lesson that I have learned that has been one of the greatest aspects of my integration journey, is my own relationship and how I've come to view fear in general. Because like I said before, from this really traumatic ayahuasca experience, it felt like it unlocked within me a level of fear that I had never, ever experienced before. It was so full on that I was afraid. I really, truly believed that I would just forever kind of be stuck in this fearful experience that was so intense that I didn't know how I would handle it. And there would be nights, even a year after this experience. So this kind of shows you how long the integration can be just from one ayahuasca journey. Nights where I would wake up and it was almost like I would be back in that space. It, I guess, was sort of like a PTSD experience where I was re-experiencing that level of fear. It was a lot. It was a lot to handle. And one thing that is said about ayahuasca is that she never gives you more than you can handle, which I believe is true. I think it can come really close. At times it can come so close that we ourselves doubt if we are capable of handling it. But you are capable. Ayahuasca will not give you more than you can handle, even if at times it feels very, very close. Oftentimes within the spiritual community, there's this saying that everything is either love or fear. And when you are in fear, you are not in love. And I think that there's an aspect of that that's true, but again, it's like it's almost demonizing fear. And I don't think that we need to demonize fear. I don't think that we need to demonize anything. In fact, I think that in order to really integrate and have a more nurturing and safe relationship with fear, it's important that we allow it to arise when it needs to arise. In all honesty, when we can be a safe container for fear to arise, fear itself, the energy of fear, will not need to be expressed as strongly because it will feel safe. If you think of a child that is upset, but it is being held in the safe arms of its mother, and it knows that it's safe, it knows that it's nurtured, that child might still have a little bit of a temper tantrum. It might still cry, it's needing to express, but it may do so and do so for a shorter amount of time. Do so, express the feeling, and then come back to that feeling of safety with its mother. And so in the same way, it's like if we can be a mother, a nurturing, comforting space for the fear to arise within, to know that it's held, to know that it's accepted, then it can do its thing and it can pass. So it's still going to arise. Again, it's part of the human experience. Like, we are going to feel fear. But if we can shift our relationship with it, if we can shift the way that we view fear, we can sit with it, we can notice it, we can be aware of it, we can witness, like I talked about before, being the witness to the fear, but not necessarily attaching stories to it. We do not have to fear fear. As ironic as that sounds, there's a difference between feeling fear and fearing fear. Moving on to the next lesson, and this is one of the greatest gifts and greatest lessons that I have learned from Grandmother Ayahuasca, is that connection is why we are here. Connection is essential. It is an essential part of the integration journey. It is an essential part of this journey of life. Just realizing the value, the beauty of human relationships, of connection, of people. The ayahuasca journey, and especially the integration process, it can be really overwhelming. There are so many shifts and changes, and our path moving forward, ayahuasca, is not going to be the same as the path that we were on before. And oftentimes it can feel a little bit lonely. We can feel like maybe coming home, other people don't understand what we have been through. And so to be able to connect and to form community with like-minded people, with people who understand what you have been through, or just with people who understand you in general, is a gift. It is so important in the process of integration to have community. There's a saying that I really love, and it is that people will be in your life for a reason, a season, or a lifetime. And yes, the ones that are in our lives for a lifetime, what a gift. But it is just as powerful to have relationships and connections with these people who are there for a season or just for a very specific reason, even if it doesn't always feel good. Sometimes human connection can be challenging. It can be heartbreaking. It can be traumatic. And it still has happened for a purpose, serving our greater spiritual and emotional and personal growth if we allow it to do so. Some of our greatest teachers are the people who trigger us the most, are the people and the relationships that are most challenging to us. Yeah, human connection and connection in general is just so profound and is a really, really important aspect of the integration process. Conscious relationships and communication and conversation have really provided me with some of my deepest support and my greatest breakthroughs in times during the integration process when otherwise I may have felt very alone. And beyond connection with other people, of course, there is also an element of being connected to ourselves and to nature and to everything. I mean, connection goes beyond human connection. It is connection to all that is. After an ayahuasca experience, spending time in nature, spending time connecting to your purpose, to what your values are, to what is important to you, and connecting to yourself. Maybe that's through journaling, maybe it's through meditation, or you're connecting to your body through movement, through a yoga practice, through taking walks in nature, and just doing what makes you happy, doing what lights you up, connecting with things that bring you joy. Connection is really why we are here. The journey of life is one back to wholeness. It is one back to oneness. And that is connection. That is union. That is us realizing that there is no separation, that separation is just an illusion. And that actually is what creates the fear and the feelings of loneliness, anxiety, and depression. It is all stemming from the illusion of separation. So stepping back into that understanding that we are all connected, that we are all one, is one of the greatest sources of healing. The next lesson that I have learned is that integration is a lifelong journey. This is not a process that happens within a set time frame. You will be integrating the lessons and the realizations that have come from your ayahuasca or plant medicine journey for the rest of your life. Because truly, integration is the process of life. We are always integrating. We are always continuing to implement the different things that we have learned and to weave them into the tapestry that is our life. And sometimes there is actually a right time for us to understand things more deeply. Right after an ayahuasca experience may not be the time for us to fully understand or fully process. It could be 5 years later, 10 years later. Who knows? Maybe it's on your deathbed when you finally understand what it is that you were experiencing, why it is that you were experiencing, what it all meant. So don't expect and don't judge yourself if you feel like you're still figuring things out. If you still feel like there are lessons that are being integrated, no matter how long it takes, time is an illusion anyway, so it doesn't really matter. But yeah, integration is an ongoing process, and I do actually have a video all about integration, so I will link that up here if that is something that you would like to dive into more deeply. Okay, last but definitely not least, certainly not least, is that it all comes back to love. Ayahuasca reminds you that love is the foundation of everything. Love is who we are. It is really the energy and the spirit that creates consciousness in this physical vessel. That is love. This is really part of why I think ayahuasca kept throwing things at me that felt really dark and challenging. And it was almost like ayahuasca was showing me all these experiences that were the opposite of love so that I had the opportunity to accept them with love. The things that are so challenging, so hard to love. It's like if you can't love that, you aren't truly stepping into unconditional love. It was always about coming back to love. It was always about really transmuting these energies that don't feel like love into love, because that is all that there is. That is all that we are. That is why we are here, to recognize and remember that on a deeper level, everything and everyone is love. You know, when this life, whatever it is, I don't have all the answers to that certainly, but when this life ends, it is what we return to. And that is one thing that I have experienced with ayahuasca, is that first journey, that experience of returning home, of returning back to oneness and to love and expansion and beauty. And it is just the most beautiful, profound feeling that you could ever experience. It's actually always with us. It's not that we're separate from it right now. It's just that in this human experience, we often forget that that is who we are and what we are. And that's part of the journey. That's part of the integration, is coming back to that remembrance. Honestly, there is so much more. Like, there's so many lessons that I've learned. There's so many things that I'm continuing to understand. It could go on forever. Those are just some of the main ones that really have stuck out to me and spoken so deeply to my soul in this process. I did promise that I would answer a couple questions that come up very often. So let's get into that. So the first one that people ask all the time is, was it worth it? Was the suffering and the pain and the depression afterwards, the deep, deep fear, was it worth it? If I had been asked this question the days after my ceremony, the months after my ceremony, perhaps even like a year after my ayahuasca ceremony, I would not have known how to answer that question. I would have said no immediately. A year after, I would have said I was still kind of figuring it out because the highs and the lows were so intense and the fear was still so strong. As I said before, there were times where I kind of thought that I had ruined myself and broken my brain. So I would not have known how to answer that question if you had asked me within the first year afterwards. Now, 2 years later, I can confidently say that yes, it was very, very worth it. And that's not to say that it is for everyone. We'll get to that in a second. But for me personally, and my experience and my growth and the lessons I have learned, it has been beyond worth it. I guess for me, ayahuasca knew that the greatest lessons and transformations would really come from like diving deep, deep into the fear. And that can be so challenging, but I'm able to connect more deeply. I'm able to see life from a different perspective. I feel like there's just like a deeper union that has taken place within me of, like I said, merging this kind of dark and light and bringing that all into wholeness that had never happened before, that I was never willing to look at before. The connections I've made, the way that I'm able to see life in a different way now, it's really been invaluable. It's been scary as shit. At times it just sucked. Like, just being so honest, at times it was just awful, but worth it in every way. I wouldn't change it for a second. And I wouldn't have it any other way. The final question is ayahuasca for everyone? Whew. Okay. So many things, so many thoughts. The first thing that I will say is that as I am still integrating and will forever be integrating in this lifetime, I don't know if I can truly answer that question for everyone. I don't have that answer. I have my thoughts around it. It does seem to me that if someone has hold on. Rewind. Ayahuasca is not necessarily for everyone when we come from the perspective of certain contraindications. And I do get into that more in my original ayahuasca video, but yes, on the most basic level, there are contraindications to ayahuasca, such as schizophrenia, certain health conditions. So of course, look that up. Do your research, make sure that you don't have a mental health condition or a physical health condition that is a contraindication to ayahuasca. But those things aside, technically speaking, I think that anyone could work with ayahuasca and that you can make it through whatever it is that arises, as challenging as it may be, as scary as it may be. I do believe that ayahuasca will not give you more than you can handle. Now, if you are already really, really struggling with your mental health and you do not have a proper support system, you don't understand how to integrate things as they arise, that may be something that you really want to work on before working with ayahuasca. Like maybe getting that support system, having a meditation practice or a yoga practice, something that really allows you to work with your own energy and calm your nervous system, because that can be something really powerful to do before working with ayahuasca, is to have a calm and balanced nervous system. But that being said, ayahuasca is an intelligence that is smarter than I am in this human vessel. And she knows what we're capable of. She knows what we can handle. So when people ask, is ayahuasca safe for everyone? I think, not counting the contraindications, yes, ayahuasca is safe. However, that does not mean that everyone needs ayahuasca. It does not mean that we all have to do ayahuasca and that to have our most transformational, powerful spiritual journey, that ayahuasca is necessary. I think that plant medicine is a beautiful teacher. It is a profound experience that can oftentimes allow us to have perspectives that we may not have reached in in that kind of way, but it's not necessary. None of this is necessary. There is no set rule. There is no set way. Medicine work isn't necessarily for everyone, and it doesn't have to be for everyone. No one is better or worse because they do or do not work with plant medicine. We all have our own path. We all have our own modalities. Also, we all have different phases in our lives. There may be times where you are feeling called to do this really profound, deep medicine, spiritual work, and then other times where you're feeling more called to be very grounded, to be more in your body and in this earthly experience. At the end of the day, you know more than anyone else what is right for you, and it is so important to trust that inner knowing and trust the innate wisdom that is inside of you. If you feel called to work with ayahuasca, then trust that, honor that. If you don't, then trust that and honor that. Just always come back to the wisdom that is within you. And the more that you can listen to that, the more that you can honor the spirit inside you that really has all of the answers, the better you will be. So I will leave you with one last quote. This is a message by Mexican healer and poet Maria Sabina. Cure yourself with the light of the sun and the rays of the moon, with the sound of the river and the waterfall, with the swaying of the sea and the fluttering of birds. Heal yourself with mint, with neem and eucalyptus. Sweeten yourself with lavender, rosemary and chamomile. Hug yourself with the cocoa bean and a touch of cinnamon. Put love in tea instead of sugar, and take it looking at the stars. Heal yourself with the kisses that the wind gives you and the hugs of the rain. Get strong, with bare feet on the ground, and with everything that is born from it. Get smarter every day by listening to your intuition, looking at the world with the eye of your forehead. Jump, dance, sing, so you live happier. Heal yourself with beautiful love, and always remember, you are the medicine. Okay, my loves. If you're still here, I love you so much. Thank you for holding out. I know that this has been a long video. We've changed location, we've changed days. I hope you found it to be helpful. I hope that something in this message resonated with you. I am going to link all of my other ayahuasca videos down below in the description box because I do have quite a lot. So there may be other videos that resonate or would answer some questions that you may have. But again, I thank you for being here. I thank you for this beautiful journey that you are on of healing and transformation. We are all in this together, and I'm just so grateful for you. So thank you. I'm sending you the biggest hug. If you liked this video, please do give it a thumbs up and subscribe. And until next time, I will see you in the next video.